All right. So, about 2 weeks ago, I was hanging out at the Little League fields, which I do a lot of my life, and someone came up to me and we started to have a conversation. I knew them well-ish, but as we started talking, I eventually got to the point where I was like, "So, how are things lately? How are you doing?" was kind of my general opening question. And they started talking. And they started talking about, and I don't know if it's like, I think it's because there are some people who know I'm a pastor, and so there's that like pastor / priest / confessional guy, that people will start saying things in very public spaces that I don't think they quite understand the environment that they are in when they begin having these conversations. And so we're just like standing by the dugout and they start, and I'm like, why don't we walk over here and not like over by these miners? And so they're talking about all of these things, and they start sharing, and they start like opening up about all this hurt and this pain, and they start name dropping people. I don't know who they're talking about, but they're just talking about all this pain, and I'm like, man, that's a lot. So I say, and I quote, "Man, that is a lot for a week." And he says, "Oh, no, this happened like 15 years ago." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So then what was the part about this week?" He's like, "Well," and then he dove into the week. And I was like, whoa, and it was just amazing to me how effortlessly he began to talk about pain that he was holding decades old, as if it was like no big thing, and as if it was just totally normal. I don't know if you know this yet, but there are people in this world who will frustrate you. They will piss you off. And you can love them and get along with them, but at the end of the day, they really frustrate you. There are people who just every time you get around them, they're quarrelsome, and you will end up fighting with them, maybe verbally, emotionally, maybe sometimes physically, depending on the environment. There are people who will find you at fault for everything, even if you've done nothing wrong or if you were even involved. But somehow it's your fault. It's always your fault. There are people who will try to set you up to fail. There are people who will try to flip the story on you to make you the bad guy. At the end of the day, one thing we all eventually realize, whether we want to admit it or not, is that everyone in this life eventually will fail you. Everyone. And if you're like, "Well, not my so-and-so." Yeah, they will. No one is perfect. So eventually, everybody, even you're like, "Well, not my mom." I have the sweetest mother on the planet. And yes, sometimes my mother fails me. I know, Betty, it's horrible, but it's true. Not Betty. Betty, you only one time. I remember, like 92, right? You failed him. But it's true. Eventually, everyone in this life is going to fail you. And when that happens, because all a failure is someone missing the mark of your expectation. Right? You have an expectation of a relationship, of a phone call, of a season, of a time, of a dinner, whatever it may be. And when they fail, when they don't meet that expectation, whether you stated it or not, it is more helpful when you state it, but most of the time we don't. There is a debt that is created. And it shifts the relationship to a debt and debtor, someone who is owed something and someone who owes, which is why even in our common vernacular, even today, we have phrases like, "You owe me," or "They took something from me," or "I can't forgive them yet because they haven't said to me or given me or paid back me." And there's this gap that is created, and when that happens, it allows like this superhighway of your soul to go to unforgiveness. Forgiveness is a funny thing, because I think we would all acknowledge that we should, but none of us do. Right? It's the thing that if I were to say, "Do you think you should forgive?" You'd be like, "Absolutely." And I'll say, "Well, then why haven't you forgiven him?" You're like, "Well," and then all the excuses come up. You're like, "Well, let me tell you a story." And I promise you, if I asked everyone to come up to this mic and say, "I want to hear your terrible story of why you don't forgive," you could share that story. And everyone would go, "I get it. Yeah, gosh, yeah, that makes sense." And then someone will stand up in the room and go, "You think that's bad? Hold on." And then they will walk up, right? And because everyone's got a story, everyone's got a worse story, and they're like, "Dude, I would forgive that easy. Wait till they hear this." And then you go up and you say the story. But there are people that have a hold on your life, a people who have a hold on your soul that have had a hold on you for years and years and years, sometimes even decades, that people have a grip on your life. Here's the difficult thing. There are people who you have not let go, who have a grip on your life that you will never see again. Because they have moved to the other side of the country, or even worse, they are not even alive anymore. And they are in the grave, and you are still being bound up by the thing that you're like, well, I can never forgive them. Okay, they're gone. You're never going to have a conversation with them ever again, and you're just holding on to this. And like I said, I don't mean to belittle or make light of what you're going through or the pain of the situation. Like I said, I agree with you. If you came up and shared the story, I would probably agree with you and be like, yeah, that's a terrible story. I can see how you don't forget. It all makes sense. But for so many of us, the concept of forgiveness is a principle that never becomes practical. It's just something that we would all nod and smile, but not actually do anything about. But before we get too far into this, in case you haven't already picked up on it, what if Jesus was serious about forgiveness? Spoiler, he was. So, settle in. I want to mention two quick things that are, anytime I talk about forgiveness, I have to make sure that I mention these two things because it's really important. The first is, well, I'll say them together and I'll separate them. Forgiveness is not forgetting, and forgiveness is not fair. Okay, so let me say those two things. First off, forgetting. A lot of people think, there even is the phrase, forgive and forget. That is the dumbest advice I've ever heard. Because when you forgive, yes, but don't forget, that's called a boundary. That's called being healthy. I liken it to if someone cuts you, you don't then heal up the wound and then go play with knives with them again. You heal up the wound and then you go, oh, I remember that. That was the last time that I played with him with a knife and I got hurt. I probably shouldn't do that anymore. So it's not forgetting, being like, I wonder where that came from. No, you know where that came from. So you set up a boundary. You don't go back. Or you make sure that trust is built because you have lived long enough to know that trust is something that is built over a lifetime and lost in a second. And so the idea of, well, why don't you just rebuild trust? Well, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. Trust takes a tremendous amount of time. So we don't forgive and forget. That's ridiculous. The second is forgiveness isn't fair. And a lot of times this is the thing that we wrestle with because they took something from me. They owe me. And I feel incomplete. I don't have what I used to have. There's something missing. Yes. And you may never get that back. And that's going to have to be okay. How? Because of what we're going to talk about this morning. So here's what I want to do. Let me give you just kind of a 30,000-foot flyover of where we're going this morning. The first, and I want to talk about where Jesus talks about this. There's a ton of places, but one I want to zero in on today in Matthew chapter 18. And then I'm going to give you 5 pillars of forgiveness. 5 things to think about, consider, pontificate as you think about forgiveness. So, flyover, Matthew 18, 5 pillars of forgiveness. So, let us pray, and then we'll jump in together, starting in Matthew 18. God, we thank you so much for this morning and your challenge through your Son, Jesus, to forgive. And God, I can only imagine the faces, the names, the situations, the scenarios that are on people's hearts and minds right now as we even mention forgiveness. And that welling up nervousness or anxiety of, well, that means I'm going to have to deal with this. God, I pray that you would just allow us to just set that aside for a moment and hear clearly what you have for us. Jesus, it's in your name we pray. And all God's people said, amen. If you don't have a Bible, you can grab one. We have some back at that exit and right over there. If you don't own one, take it with you. It is our gift to you, or you can open up on the app, or it'll be up on the screen in just a moment. So, Matthew 18, starting in verse 21. Here we go. So Peter came up to him being Jesus, and said, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive? As many as 7 times? Now, this was a valid question. Now, Peter has no shame at all. Peter is hardcore. Peter is the kind of guy who would show up to a prayer meeting with a shank just in case. Like, you just never know about Peter, because Peter's lopping guys' ears off. Peter's going to war. Peter's like, I'll die with you. Peter has no shame in just walking up to Jesus and be like, hey, just shoot me straight. And so he does here, but there's something underneath the surface that we don't necessarily immediately recognize. Here's what he and all the other hearers would have known, is that in the law, per instance, or per aggression, you would forgive someone 3 times, not 4. Once they cross that threshold into 4, game over. You are now no longer obligated by the law to forgive them. So Peter thinks he's being smart when he asks Jesus this question. So in essence, what he's saying is, Jesus, if my brother comes and sins against me, and what is sin? Sin, in this sense, by what this word is trying to communicate, is any time someone misses the mark. So again, back to what we were talking about. You have an expectation, they miss the expectation. They fail you. So how often, when someone fails me, do I have to go forgive him? And then he asks, and here's what he's asking. Here's the underlying message that all the hearers would have heard. Are you telling me that I have to forgive him double the standard plus 1? So he's going well beyond. He's in essence saying, do I have to forgive him a ton? And Jesus, because everyone around would have been like, what? 7 times? That's crazy. I didn't even forgive my brother 4 times. You're 7 times. And Peter's like, yeah, you heard it 7 times. You guys go 4, I'll go 7. That's just how I roll. That's Peter. But then Jesus answers, and this is what he says in verse 22. Jesus said, I don't say to you 7. I'll take your 7, and then I'll multiply it. But 77 times, or 7 times 7, or 7 plus 7. Scholars disagree on exactly what the math is, but the point is the same. It's more than you think. So take whatever you think is the opportunity or the amount of times you have to forgive, and then make sure it's more. Because let me see if I want to say this now. I don't know if I do. Yeah. I'll say it now. All right. So here's the thing. We all in our life has someone or something who we think is beyond forgiveness. Every single person in this room has a line in the sand wherever it is. And it's different for everyone. But you have a line. And once someone crosses that line, culturally, what do? You're dead to me. I never want to speak to you again. And that's in essence what Peter's asking. Peter is saying, here's my current line of you're dead to me. Do I need to broaden it a little bit? Can I take it out to here? And Jesus goes, no, I want you to take it away. I don't want you to have one. Because notice, Jesus doesn't have a time frame or he doesn't have a situation. Jesus takes those restraints off. And he doesn't say, if someone sins against you multiple times within the context of a week, you need to forgive them. No, he takes all of that off. Now, I know the first thing people come back, so you're just saying I'm a punching bag? No, that's back to boundaries. That's another message. Don't put that on this message, okay? That's irresponsible on your part. What I'm saying is, if we are saying, yes, there are proper boundaries, but then someone just continues, or you're holding on to that thing from a week ago, a month ago, 10 years ago, Jesus would say, yeah, you need to forgive them. You need to let that go. You need to move on at some point. You can't keep holding on to that. Because here's the thing. I can almost guarantee they let go of it years ago. They're not running around holding it. You are. And so why are you holding on to something? Why are you bearing the weight in a backpack that's just weighing you down all the time on something that they forgot about probably within 5 minutes after they did it? They probably don't even know they did it. They did that thing. They didn't invite you. They didn't text you back. They didn't call you. They didn't give you the money back. You're like, man, they still owe me $100. They don't even remember the $100. But you're like, no, man, it was, 2013. They took $100 from me. And we just hold on to this. So what are we supposed to do with that? Great question. Let me give you five things to think about. The first is this. that forgiveness is never an accident. Forgiveness is never an accident. Most of the time, I think what we engage in, and we call it forgiveness, is what I'll call passive-aggressive forgiveness. It's when we just kind of let enough time go by and assume things are fine. Well, if I just let, 20 years go by, that's fine. But then if I were to ask you about that situation, about that person, about that event, about that face, about that name, if the emotions still rise up, you haven't let it go. If I can bring up that name, that face, that event, and there is no emotion attached to it, yeah, then you probably let it go. But just so you know, time doesn't exactly heal everything. Time does heal things. It does not heal forgiveness. It just sticks around. Or what we'll do is we'll rewrite the facts of the story in our mind to make it not as painful as it was a year ago. And I bet there was probably a good, and then we tell ourselves all of these things to justify us holding on to the hurt. Or we lowered the offense. Well, it wasn't that bad, to let us off the hook of having to extend forgiveness. We will do everything we can to not have to walk through the painful act of actually forgiving someone. Now, let me be clear. Does this mean that we walk up to them and say, hey, just so you know, I forgive you? And then they're like, for what? You know what you did, right? And then you walk away. That's not what I'm talking about. Or just sending them a text, I forgive you. Like, about what? And then just contact deleted. Like, wait, what? I'm not saying this a passive aggressive. I'm just saying of what you are holding on to in your soul. I hope you know that no one can make you forgive. I cannot stand up here and make you forgive anyone. You have to do this voluntarily. I'm going to show you a passage in Mark 11:25. Jesus is talking in the context of relationships and prayer as well. And he says, whenever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. Now, I think we would all agree that prayer is a voluntary, intentional act. Yes? Like, we don't just find ourselves, what was that? I was just praying. I don't even know where that came from. Maybe. Fozzie does that. It happens all the time. It's really annoying. I'll just walk into his office and he'll just be starting. I'm like, you good? I'm sorry. I just fell into prayer. I don't know. But it's an intentional thing that you have to choose to pray in the same way forgiveness is as well. And so what Jesus is saying is, in a routine way, I want you to forgive. All the time, I want you to forgive. Notice that whenever Jesus invites us, it's the same thing I was talking about last week. Everything about Jesus is an invitation. Everything about forgiveness is an invitation. He never forces it. He never says, you cannot get into heaven if you... I invite you to forgive. It would be best for you if you forgive. Now, back to the debt created. Because I think there are two ways to go about it. When there is a debt created between you and another person, there's really one of two paths. The first path is to demand payment. I need them to say they're sorry. I need them to give me my money back. I need them to grovel. I need them to, whatever it may be, I need them to pay me back in some way from what they took from me. Or cancel the debt. Those are the only two options. Wait for payment or cancel the debt. Those are the only two options that exist. Because when you hold someone, there's an element of where they don't even know that they have to pay you back, right? Unless you've said to them, hey, you need to forgive me, and then they just don't. That's a different situation. That's called maturity. We won't talk about that now. But in any situation, there's also a gap that is created another way. And this is one of my favorite verses to share in the midst of a wedding. I don't know why I do it here, but I do. The second is expect a need for forgiveness. It should never shock you that someone fails you. You should kind of Expect it. Check this verse out. And I love the translation in Colossians 3 in the New Living. This is what it says. Make allowance for each other's faults. Meaning, expect people to fail you. And give them a wide space in which to fail you. Make allowance. Plan for it. Expect it. And forgive one who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you. I love how he puts that in there. Remember, you were forgiven. So you must forgive others. I think there are a lot of times when we set people up for failure because we expect them to never fail us. And that's just not true. It's just not going to happen. So can you make allowance? Like I said, it's one of the verses that I love sharing in the midst of a wedding because everyone on their wedding day always says the same thing. I've done a lot of premarital counseling, and everyone who I've ever married, whether they're getting married at 19 or 43, they all say the same thing. I'll ask them a question. Is there ever a day you think that you will love the person that you're about to marry any less than you do right now? And they all say the same thing. No, never. And I just, okay. So there's nothing they could possibly do. No, nothing they could do. I will love them forever. Like, ugh, so gross. So then I love to check back in like 3 weeks into the marriage and be like, hey, how's that like there's nothing they could ever do? They're like, yeah, we know. But I would like to encourage you, make allowance. Expect that, yeah, these people are going to fail me. Not everyone is going to be perfect. So that when they do fail you, you're not shocked and surprised. You can just quickly step in with forgiveness. This next one is a little harder, and I'll camp on this one for a minute. Forgiveness is a process. All right. Remember how last week I was talking about first decision, second decision? If you're like, what are you talking about? That's a hint to go back and listen to last week. I'll do it again in this regard. I really do believe there are two separate parts to forgiveness. There's canceling the debt, right? Saying, I don't need you to repay me. I forgive you. I'm going to let that go. And that's great. But then there is bringing your emotions and your behaviors in alignment with that decision. Right? Because you can say, I forgive you, and then be pissed off for the next 20 years. And I would ask you, well, did you really forgive if you're still holding on to? Because if you have forgiven, well, then how can you then move your behaviors and your emotions in line with that decision? And just so you know, this takes time. The pain that you've been holding on to for 30 years does not go away in 30 seconds. Maybe it does, and maybe God blesses you with that you just, man, I forgive, and everything, and you just feel light. That's great. That is not my story. I'm assuming that is not your story. That is not most of us, our story. Like I said, trust takes a lifetime to build and a second to lose. And so, yes, it takes time. But how can you go about starting in on that process? Well, Matthew later is going to talk about this, which is why he doesn't reference it here. I don't have time to go all into it. But he lays it all out in Matthew 18. It's how he talks about how to confront someone, how to do something in love, how to make amends, how to build each other back up. He goes through the whole thing. But I will give you just two things. The first is to pray for someone, which seems ridiculous, I know. But Matthew 5, I don't have this up here, I don't think, no. Let me just read this to you. Matthew 5. Verse 43 and 44. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. One of the strongest ways that you can go about changing your heart and soul and your posture to be like Christ towards someone is to pray for them. If someone has hurt you badly, pray for them. And not, Lord, I pray that they would go bankrupt this year. Lord, I pray that they lose their job. Lord, now that's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. Because, well, yeah, we'll deal with that later. That'll be next week. But a genuine, God, I pray that there would be good things coming for them. God, I pray, and you want to pray something? This is the second thing. Pray that God would bless them. Romans 12:14 says this. Romans 12:14. Oh, we have it up there. Awesome. Bless those who persecute you. Bless, and do not curse them. Bless them. Bless them. Bless them. What does bless them mean? Walk up and give them $20? No. Bless, in this context, is to speak well of them. See, many times another thing that we can do is, I forgive them, and then I just talk crap about them behind their face, or behind their back all the time, right? That like, I forgave them, but every time you bring up my mother-in-law, I'm just going to run my mouth about her, and it's not going to be good. I've forgiven them, but anytime someone says, weren't you married to, yeah, and then you just start running your mouth. No, it's to speak well of them. It's to do good by them. Another verse that people love to take out of context is a little further down in Romans 12, verse 20. It says, on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. We love that. We're like, yeah. And there's a lot of us who maybe were raised to think that, heap burning coal is just to like a shame, because coals especially in the Old Testament, are a sign of judgment and of weight. And that if you just heap burning coals, you are just dumping shame on them, and that you're so nice that they just can't function anymore under the weight of your kindness, and they're just broken by your goodness. Not necessarily what that means, because that would be inconsistent with literally everything else that Jesus and Paul were talking about, right? If the whole idea is be kind, bless them, pray for them, and shame them, you'd be like, that makes no sense at all. Well, in context, oftentimes, because, central heating and air was not a thing. And so in certain times of the year, when things would get really cold, heat and warmth was life. And you could not survive without fire in your home. And if you were gone for too long and didn't manage your fire well, and the fire inside your house went out, you only had one choice. And that is to take some sort of container that you had and go around to your other neighbors and ask, and you carry it on your head and ask, do you have some coals that you could give me so that I could have fire, that I could have life? So that by loving them, by blessing them, by praying for them, you don't just give them 2 or 3 coals and be like, good luck, buddy, blow on that for 3 hours and see if it ignites for you. No, you heap. You say, here's everything you need for life. Here you go. Be blessed. Be well. Here you go. So often I think when we think about forgiveness, we do the first part. I forgive you, yeah. But then we don't bring ourselves into alignment with that. It's like signing up for a marathon, starting, and then just bailing after the first mile, and then still putting the sticker on the back of your car and being like, I did that. No, you didn't do nothing. Yeah, I did. I paid the entry fee. I have the number, everything. No, but you bailed at the first mile. Yeah, I know. But it's the intent that counts. I signed up. I did the thing. I started. Yeah, but you didn't finish the process. And a lot of us, I think that's how we are with forgiveness. We may have started the process. We didn't finish it. We didn't actually see it all the way through to completion. And this takes time. It takes a tremendous amount of time. But don't you know that you make time for things that you value? I will make a tremendous amount of time this afternoon for the Masters. Why? Because I just love it. And I was like, how could you just sit there and watch guys play golf for hours on end? It is quite easy, actually. I've done it for the last 3 days. It's magical. Everyone who works with me can tell you. They walked in on Thursday. I didn't do hardly anything on Thursday. Why? Because one of my screens was my message, the other was the Masters. And I paid attention to one screen more than the other. And if that's ungodly, then I'll take that. I'll own that. But it takes time. And if this is of value to you, then you will make time for it. Just so you know, the overwhelming majority of what God calls us to takes time. I hope you know that. Processes take time. Life change takes time. These things happen over weeks, months, and years, not seconds. So if you've been wrestling with this for a long time, keep going. You're not quite finished yet. Last two. Forgiveness transforms feelings. I want to read you another one out of Romans. Romans chapter 12. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Do not be conformed to this world, but renew your mind. Here's what the world says about forgiveness. The world says about forgiveness, make sure you forgive when you feel good and ready to. I don't know if you know this, you will never feel good and ready. You will always find a reason not to. So, what Christ would have you do is to forgive, do the action, and let the emotions follow, rather than wait for the emotion to spur the action. That makes sense? Let me say that again, because this is really important. What we are encouraged to do is to do the action of forgive, trusting that the emotions will follow, rather than waiting for the emotions to have the action. That's most of the time what we do. We just wait and wait and wait. And if you wait, you will never feel like it. It's the same thing. People who go to the gym don't wait to feel like they want to. They go, and every personal trainer will tell you eventually the feelings will come. Eventually it won't hurt so bad. Eventually you won't be as sore as you are today. Don't quit. Just keep going. In the same way, our forgiveness transforms our feelings. Our feelings do not inform our forgiveness. And then lastly, forgiveness requires faith. Because if you think this is easy, then you haven't done it nearly long enough. Forgiveness requires faith. One of my favorite stories in this regard comes out of Luke chapter 17. Check this out. I love this passage. Pay attention to yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him. This is Jesus speaking to the disciples or the apostles. And if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in the day and turns to you 7 times, he's also playing against the way more than you expect, saying, I repent, you must forgive him. And what do all the apostles say? Yes, Lord, this sounds great. They say, we need more faith for that. That's what they say. They're like, whoa, if that is the expectation, you are going to have to increase our faith because I can't do that. I love that response. It's so honest. That if what you want from me is to go and forgive more than I should, then God, you're going to have to do something supernatural here because I can't do that on my own. I need more faith to forgive them. And it's not that you forgive them because you feel that they deserve it or that they've done enough or they've come far enough. No, they are forgiven because that is what Christ has done for you. Now, I don't know, like I said, what you are holding on to. The person, the name, the circumstance, the season that comes to your mind when the word forgiveness comes up. I know for me, for years and years and years and years, it was a family member. And I actually bailed out of preaching messages on forgiveness a couple times years ago because it was one of those things where I would get up and I would preach about forgiveness and just hold this in my heart against a family member. And I would tell everyone, you need to forgive. And then if you would have called me in the hallway and you knew his name and said, hey, how are you at doing forgiving so-and-so? I'd be like, well, I mean, and I would do the same thing I just told you not to do. I'd say, well, let me explain the story. You don't understand. I get it. But that is not what Christ has called us to. What if Jesus were serious about forgiveness? We didn't even touch the portion of where Jesus would measure our forgiveness up against how we forgive others. That's a whole nother topic. But Jesus is really serious about this. He takes it very seriously. I think so much so because he knows that he gave his life for it. And so if forgiveness means that much to him personally, that he would want us in the same way to forgive others. So we're going to take a few minutes to respond, and I would encourage you, whether you stand and sing with us or just sit and just beg God to give you the grace to forgive that other person, that you don't walk out of this place without doing the hard work of extending forgiveness in the way that Christ has forgiven you. Amen? Let us pray. God, we thank you so much for this morning, for all that you've done on our behalf to forgive us. God, I pray that we would then go and do the same. God, that we would forgive others in the same way that you have forgiven us, that we wouldn't hold any grudges, that we would not let this go another month, another week, another day, another minute of holding on to whatever grudge that we have. But recognize that you were serious when you tell us that we need to forgive way more than we expect. God, I pray that you would give us the courage, confidence, as the disciples said, the faith to forgive. And know that ultimately you are judge and you will do what is right. You have asked us to play the part of someone who forgives. Jesus, we love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.